While I was playing, I read the book, maybe just like a lot of your listeners, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Changed my perspective on reality, where I started to think about how can I create this financial freedom idea, which is, having more passive income than monthly expenses. When I bought my first house, I borrowed $32,000 from Community First Bank. My parents thought I was psychotic because I was borrowing money, which is, we use cash, the whole thing. It's not productive to listen and to watch something. Productivity is getting out in the field, speaking with brokers and bankers, going to the meetups, which sounds a little cliche, but if you go to those meetups, you're gonna meet like 50 realtors and agents that are wanting to transact and do business.
All right, welcome back to another episode of The Flip Side. I've got a new friend, Nolan Sanburn, here with me. We've never sat down in person, really talked, or really met, I don't think, unless we've just crossed paths sometime in the path that I don't know about. But welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah. I love meeting new people, especially in Birmingham, especially in real estate, and running in a somewhat small circle and just trying to make it bigger.
Yeah. Well, I'm surprised we haven't crossed paths, if we actually haven't, being in like you said, Birmingham's not huge in the investing world, and niche down to the commercial world is even smaller, especially guys who are taking it serious. So I'm glad we did. I know you first. I want to dive into your story, but I know you as a dad and husband first, an investor who is systemized. You've got your business together, and you are very structured, which is I appreciate, because I strive to have my team and my business that way as well. And we were chatting a little bit before this. The commercial side seems to be that way a little bit more to have success. You can't really be half in commercial. And residential, it seems like people try to do that a little bit more. But before all that, I know you played baseball at some point. You've talked about short-term rentals a little bit. You've talked about maybe some family has been in real estate in the past. So tell me, where you come from and how'd you get to where you are now?
Yeah, born and raised in Kokomo, Indiana. Was a baseball player. Went to Arkansas, pitched there for a couple of seasons. Was a pretty good baseball player. Got drafted in the second round in 2012 and danced around the minor leagues. I was a AA, AAA nobody. Met my wife while I was pitching for the Birmingham Barons here in town. Yeah. And after that, got released. Again, married her, kids, the whole thing now. And while I was playing, I read the book, maybe just like a lot of your listeners, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Yeah. Changed my life because I kind of grew up in a family home. It was an amazing upbringing. I love my parents. It was a very trade your time for money, high paying job. And, they live in a nice home in Indiana, but it's just like, you got to go to work every day in order to pay the bills. It's not a...
What industry?
At the time, my dad was a quality engineer at Chrysler and Delco. It's like Chrysler's the world headquarters, and they build the V8 engines for Chryslers and Volkswagens and things like that. Okay, cool. And I don't know the latest on what's going on there with the plant, but it was one of those where they would come in on, to all the seniors in high school, and they'd say, hey, anybody want to make like $65,000 like next year? And it gets, the people that are going to go to college are just kind of set thinking that way. But some of the people that are on the fence, like, well, that's pretty sweet.
It's more money than I've ever seen.
65 grand. Yeah. And I'm like 18 years old,
absolutely.
And so, so my parents, they were making, middle of the road money in Indiana. Nobody's making a ton. Nobody's making a little. Everyone's in like the middle of the fairway, Well, I was in, like I said, I got drafted, was in the minor leagues, read the book, changed my perspective on reality, where I started to think about how can I create this financial freedom idea, which is, having more passive income than monthly expenses. Yeah. And I had never heard of passive income. I didn't even know what a lien was, like a mortgage lien at the time. I was just like trying to figure it out. So I started buying all my dad's buddies coffees and lunches, anybody that he knew that was owning a couple of houses, right? Like that's what I think we were all chasing at the time. I didn't know any different. And so I met a guy, Nick Pate, State Farm agent in Kokomo, that has like 30 or 40 houses now, like great mentor, kind of took me under his wing and kind of taught me the ropes on how to underwrite real estate, how to, what is a capital expense? You have to budget for property taxes, giving Uncle Sam a slice of everything that you earn. Like, I didn't know any of that stuff. And so it was really educational, beneficial to me. So then I got on the Bigger Pockets, started to listen to Bigger, the podcast when Brandon Turner was on there. And
you started like episode 1.
Oh, dude, I was like, I probably had listened to like, I'm not exaggerating, probably like 900 episodes. Yeah. Like I was just burning through them and listened to all of as many as I could. and discovered on the forums like the subject twos, the wraps, the carries, all that creative stuff. And I quickly, while I was playing baseball, like in 2017, after I got released from the White Sox, I got pretty quickly picked up by the Nationals. And during off days, I would take the red eye out of whatever city I was playing in back to Kokomo or back to Indianapolis. I'd rent a car for the day. I'd go look at like 30 or 40 houses with my manager, drive back and take the red eye back to that city, and then we'd get on the bus and go play somewhere. And I was like just so gangbuster for it. I was like, because a lot of my teammates at the time were, just playing video games, kind of floating, hoping that the big leagues would work out. And so was I. I was working for it. But I also thought after reading that book, I was like, all right, I'm just not going to get caught with my pants down. Like, I'm gonna succeed off of the field or on the field. Like, I'm just not going to lose. And so, again, I was buying these houses while I was playing professional baseball. Like, I'd be working during the day, then I'd be pitching that night. And eventually I, again, discovered I wasn't that good of a player. They got rid of me. Got back to Birmingham, got engaged, and actually at the time I didn't even have my degree. I got drafted 2 years after in college, so I went back and got my actual bachelor degree from UAB.
Okay,
and
nice.
So I am a Blazer as much as I am a Razorback. And so, but like I said, I had at that point, I had like maybe 20 houses or something. I was in Birmingham, managing stuff in Indiana. We'd flip something, we'd Airbnb something, we'd go back and forth, we'd borrow some money, we'd sell something else, just kind of the game. And so I eventually got up. I bought an apartment complex at 22 unit with no money, cute ways of getting, doing the whole song and dance they talk about in the forums. Got up to 55 houses, and then at the time bought another book and read it. It's called Commercial Real Estate Investing by Dolph DeRoos. And that was another one that really impacted my way of thinking, because there it is. Exactly. That's the one right there.
I heard you say this a couple weeks ago. I was like, I'm going to buy I haven't read that one.
Have you got through it at all?
I'm like a quarter of the way.
Okay.
But it's, I like it.
No, it's another really, really good one. It proves that real estate is the right decision to invest your money. But it kind of showed me a different path, because I, maybe like a lot of people, maybe a lot of your listeners, they have a big fear or timidness about commercial real estate, and most importantly, bigger deals, like $1 million deals. It's very intimidating, and I felt that exact same way. And because I just didn't have anybody else that I knew that was doing it. And so I read that book, and I very quickly discovered, and probably you will and your listeners will discover, it's actually a lot easier to do those types of deals than it is to do the $40,000 base hit houses. It's easier to do, which is so backward, because like I said, I'm in Kokomo. Not to mention, like I said, I was a Dave Ramsey guy. And when I bought my first house, I borrowed $32,000 from Community First Bank.
I was going to ask how you did it.
On Hoffer Road. It was a handshake deal with my dad's buddy, Scott Perkins. I bought a couple of houses from him, and I borrowed $32,000 on a handshake with Community First Bank. And my parents thought I was psychotic because I was borrowing money, which is, we use cash, the whole thing. And then, go a little bit further, and then I bought my first commercial deal over in Tarrant, Northeast Birmingham, $1,350,000. I borrowed $1 million from Renaissance Bank. And so at that point, it was just like, you're really going against what we taught you to do. And but what makes it cool, and I'll kind of close it on that, we can keep moving, is now that I've since sold all my houses. I have 12 triple net leased light industrial commercial properties. And the difference that I've discovered is, before, when I'd be buying those houses, there's a ton of competition, believe it or not, especially for like rinky-dink little houses. But it's the way that you think that's what's, I feel like, the most thing that's impacted me the most is now, because I've done $1 million deal, you don't want to look at anything smaller than that anymore. You're just like, this is not even that difficult to do. It's the same steps. There's just a few more zeros added onto it. So now it's a lot more fun to do bigger deals. You get to work with more sophisticated partners. The assets tend to be way more stable. The tenants are business owners. The leases are longer. They bump every single year. The tenant's responsible for the expenses. And I discovered that, and ever since, I've just been gangbusters and all about light industrial, triple net leases, until I graduate to the next life.
I love it, dude. There's so much I want to unpack, and I'm excited to get into this. I don't think it's a crazy unique progression, but I think it's interesting to say, my dad's an engineer. I came from the exact same kind of mindset of like we did not very well, very middle class, like just very comfortable living, never like wanted for anything. But it was very much that same mindset, just engineer, like, and I don't make fun of him, but I joke with him all the time because my dad's joined me in real estate recently.
Awesome.
6 years ago. But I talk about it all the time, and it's still, we work really well together because I'm the exact opposite, probably more like your personality of like, I'm going to find my parachute after I jump out of the plane.
That's right.
Kind of thing. And he's the opposite. Like he's never even getting on the plane until he sees it. Right. And so, and then I started swinging hammers, getting paid $6 an hour for a builder out here. And listening to Brandon Turner, episode 1, all the way up to like I'm caught up, and now I'm in a better life, and all that stuff. So, it's same story. Like I said, I don't think it's super unique. I think a lot of people probably have that similar kind of path. But it's cool to hear. I don't know if I've actually sat down with someone who's done all of that and that progression.
Well, it's not really, and it's one of those things that's the when I first got started, it was like working. You had negative compounding working against you. It's like everything's working against you because you don't have the contacts, you don't have the banking relationships, you don't have the broker relationships. But then once you do a couple of deals here and there and you discover the steps and the system that it takes to get something from start to finish, you're like, wait a minute, okay, I can do this. And then it creates this confidence, and then it starts to compound for you. And then you're like, well, wait a minute, I can do this over here. What if I added a zero? What if I started looking for something more stable? What if I started introducing partners? What if I introduced my bankers with different terms? What if I was the one offering them collateral versus them asking me, or me asking them and praying that they would give me a loan? Like, what if I just changed my perspective and thought process a little bit? And then what do you know too? It's almost like when you start focusing on one very specific thing, you purchase a brand new, white Toyota 4Runner.
Yeah.
That's all you see on the road at that point. You just see all the same types of cars because that's the only thing you're looking at. And so that's what I've discovered. And now it's really cool when I've got great banking and broker partners and accounting and attorney partners where we've got all the pieces on the chessboard, and now it's all about just finding the right deal to pull the trigger and make it happen.
Talk to me about that. So you named I think the street or the address, that very, very first deal. So you're flying back and forth from cities, going back to Kokomo. Kokomo, is that what it's called?
Kokomo, Indiana.
Okay. So was it owned by your dad's friend, and what did do you remember the numbers?
Oh yeah, 1527 South Cortland Avenue.
Okay.
On it's in Kokomo, Indiana. It's right near Highland Park. If anybody's listening, you can look it up.
So it's a single family home.
Single family home.
Had a tenant in it.
Had a tenant in it. It was renting for like $900 a month. The guy sold it to me for $60,000. I don't remember if that was a good deal or not. Probably would have negotiated stronger if I would have known what I know now.
Yeah.
But like you said, at the time, I just was like, I gotta do something. I can't just like read about it. Like I have to take some type of action. And so, like I said, I was meeting with this guy, Scott. Scott's like, hey, I got these last two. He was already in commercial at that point. So Scott said, hey, I got these last couple of rentals. Why don't I just sell these to you? And like I said, Nick Pate was the guy that did the insurance on it. He said, you need to talk to my guy at Community First Bank. They'll lend you the money. And he didn't co-sign or anything. But remember, I was in the minor leagues. I wasn't making any money.
Right.
Like $600 every 2 weeks. Like no money.
Yeah.
So I definitely could not qualify for that loan.
Yeah.
And because they're a local bank, I don't know how many billions of assets they have, but they're not regulated the same way the publicly traded ones are. Yeah. So it was a handshake loan. Like I personally guaranteed it, but on paper I didn't have a whole lot of guarantees. Yeah. So but they gave me a loan. It was a good deal because the house was worth probably $90,000. There was some deferred maintenance on it, but he was over it. He was just like, I'm going to move to the next site, go work on my storage unit facilities, things like that. And so I got in the game, right? It was that kind of epiphany moment where I was actually down in Navarre Beach near Pensacola with my family and my in-laws. And I get a notification on my phone. Hey, his name is Lee Newcomb, and he was my first tenant. And I get a notification on my phone from my bank. Hey, Lee Newcomb has deposited, $900 in rent for this month. And I'm like, so this is what these guys are talking about. No way. This,
I'm rich.
I'm rich. Yeah, seriously. I'm like, this is so passive income. This is exactly what they talk about on the forums. Yeah. These guys are totally right. And so after I, discovered that, it was great for the first couple of months. And like, something goes sideways. The dishwasher goes out, like whatever the sitch was. And then I discovered okay, do I really want to be managing this site from so far away?
Yeah.
And then I'd give him a discount on rent for him to go. I just was learning in it. I didn't know what I was doing. And then we got by a couple more. And then Nick Pate was like, you need to go hire my property manager to manage a couple of your 4 or 5 building properties.
You were managing those yourself.
I was managing myself from Birmingham.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is not like making a lot of sense. I was trying to learn QuickBooks. I was actually still in college. I was trying to finish my undergrad, just trying to figure the whole thing out.
Yeah.
And but like I said, it was like it was a lot of fun because like you said, you're in the weeds versus reading about it or listening to it on like a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dang. Do you remember what the payment was? He said $960 was the rent.
My mortgage on it was like, I mean, honestly, call it like $540 or something like that. Maybe it was ballpark like that. I think my cash flow was like $350 a month, maybe $350 a month or whatever. I wish I had another zero on it, but you know, you got to start where you got to start.
Yeah. Well, and I think that says something because if you go back to the very beginning of that story, it started with you meeting with all your dad's friends is just, hey, let me learn, which led to, hey, I've got a house, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what people really don't take the action just to get out and do the free work, right? Like that's a lot of when people come and, hey, I want to get into real estate. There's a lot of things you can do without spending money, right? Just go get the podcast education, the books, who are you talking to? What bankers do you know? What brokers do you know? And I hear you say that a lot too, of just, building your team, but also go do all that research on your own time and really understand what you're getting into and then what you want to do, right? Because you do a good job of education, but I've made every mistake there is in the book for the past 12 years investing. So it's one of the reasons I do this podcast, to try to tell people, hey, I made this mistake. Here's how you can avoid it so you don't have to go through 12 years of failure to, failing up and doing that. So
yeah, there's just a lot of you learn as you go, but like I said, it's, because what happened was I actually got up to 55 houses, like I mentioned, and I was in Birmingham. Like it was making good cash flow after debt service. I was probably making 16, 18,000 a month of net cash flow. And I was like 27 or 28, which was pretty cool. I was like you said, oh, this is awesome. I can't believe this is working. Yeah. And then of course, while I'm reconciling my own books, I'm looking on the online portal and I'm like consistently seeing 1,050 missing, 1,250 missing here. And I was like triple checking my work. I feel like I was in high school, like, going back and forth on my exam. And I discovered, unfortunately, that my property manager was just taking a couple of dollars off the top. And that like immediately jaded me because they don't talk about that on the forums. They don't tell you how to handle something like that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I was reading that commercial real estate book, and that's when I was like, okay, I've got to make a change. But to go on your point of further, a lot of people, and this was myself included out of the gate, was thinking that because they're reading about it or listening to something is them. They think it's because they're busy, they're being productive. It's not productive to listen and to watch something. Productivity is getting out in the field, walking a site, speaking with brokers and bankers, going to the meetups, which sounds a little cliche, but if you go to those meetups, you're going to meet like 50 realtors and agents that are wanting to transact and do business. Yeah. And if you go up there with some like excitement to participate and make things happen, that people will just gravitate towards you, and you say, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Bam, 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 bam. If you find this opportunity, you call me, you're guaranteed to get paid. Yeah. That's exciting to a lot of people. And so if you can have that type of, just go get it tenacity and with a pinpoint accuracy of what you're looking for, like I said about the forerunners, like those types of opportunities will start to like kind of rise at the top. That's in my experience, at least.
No, you're right, and I don't want to blow past that too quick, because as an agent, as a realtor, having people, because I list a good bit of investment property and own people reaching out saying, hey, give me information on this deal, or I want to invest in real estate. Having a crystal clear criteria or your 5 points of here's exactly what I'm looking for, that stands out, because 99% of investors who call me say, hey, bring me a deal. Period. Okay. Yeah. Great. Get in line. Right. But if you come and you have that tells me you're professional. Like you're serious. You know what you want. You've got your ducks in a row, and you stand out. And so I think that's huge. I know you've got, I think, 5 points in the industrial world that you're looking for now. If you want to dive into that, I've got kind of some questions so see if I get it right. But a mile from the interstate. Okay. Right. 10 to 40,000 feet. Yep. 16 to 18 foot ceilings. 2 roll-up doors. What's the last one?
I would say a triple net lease.
Triple net lease.
With a 3-year lease. With 3+ years on. Yeah, there you go. If it's tenanted.
Because are you only looking for occupied buildings, or are you okay with vacant stuff?
I'm okay with both.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter to me. because it depends upon your appetite as an investor. Let me back up for a second. So the biggest difference that people have to know about residential and commercial is residential real estate, as you know this, its value, its intrinsic value is dictated about what's around it. You got 10 houses in a cul-de-sac, that 11th house is going to be valued right about what all the other houses are because of the comps. And I would even go and say, step forward, if it's vacant, it's probably more valuable because someone can move in immediately versus cash flow. Commercial real estate, on the other hand, it's all valued intrinsically on how much cash flow that the building produces. So if you can increase the net operating income, you increase the value. So finding a property that's existing already cash flowing, people will trade that at a cap rate all day. But if you can find a vacant site where you can buy it, where it's on paper, if it's not producing any income, it's essentially worthless other than there's some brick and some land and things. But it's a lot less valuable, and you can find ways to increase and enhance that value by rehabbing it a little bit and putting a tenant in there and then refinancing your equity out. So or buying an adjacent parcel. There's a lot of ways to increase value, and we can go into that on ways that I've done that. And it's just knowing that that's the difference, because with residential, the only way that you can really, get good deals. Now you can educate me, but you got to find somebody that's like moving to San Francisco tomorrow and has like, I got to get out and I'm willing to sell you at a fire sale. If everyone's selling at 200, he'll pop it at 150, right? That's a good deal. Commercial, on the other hand, if I know that the market rent is $6 a foot and I've got a building that is 10,000 square feet, I can immediately know it's throwing off $60,000 a year. 10 cap, that's a $600,000 building. So I can go and offer at $200,000 on that site, because that owner most likely doesn't know the value of the building if he actually rented the space. So I can make an offer to give him some cash at $200,000. He can walk away. I can lease a space, make it valued at $600,000, refinance all my equity out, or sell it at a discount or at a 10 cap to somebody else. So there's a ton of ways to make it work, but commercial is all valued upon your creativity and imagination to find ways to extract more juice out of the building.
I love that, and that's my attraction to it, and kind of the shift over about 4 years ago. That's kind of when I started shifting away from residential. Even though I still have shiny object syndrome and buy every now and then. But,
that's right.
And we'll come back to that. But that was the attraction. So the building we're in, I bought with a partner a year ago, and it was self-managed, half rented. The tenants that were here were all under rented, under rates. And so that was that value add component. So my question for you is, if you come in and you've got a $500,000 building and it's vacant, are there certain things you set up with the bank on the payment structure and schedule? How do you mitigate the risk of the vacancy? Do you have a long due diligence period where you try to lease it during that period? What do you do to try to mitigate that risk of not having a vacant building with a payment?
Sure. Well, first, it's like you mentioned a second ago with having those very specific metrics for physical attributes. The 10 to 40,000 feet, multiple roll-up doors, ceiling height, and less than a mile off the highway. You find a building like that. I didn't just come up with that. The reason why I'm so specific is because I did some homework once figuring out, businesses that have gross revenue between $2 and $10 million. There's a lot of them that are a lot less, and a little bit less that are a lot more than that. But this is a pretty large tenant pool in the United States. And I said, what are these guys? There's 1.2 million businesses in the United States that have gross revenue between $2 and $10 million. So I said, what are these guys either owner using, or what are they leasing? And it was those 4 physical attributes of a building. So that's how I came up with it. So what I did is I said, okay, let me back into this idea then. So if I can find that site, which there's a lot of them, if you can find that site, what I'm going to do is I'm going to decrease the risk, because it's going to become more bankable now. A bank's going to understand that if my tenant gets abducted by aliens, I've got 1.2 million other opportunities to lease that space to somebody, because it's one of the largest tenant pools in the United States. So that's how I came up with that. And then regarding your question on how do you mitigate that risk of a vacancy, when you go and have that dialogue with your banker, again, that's assembling your team, number one. What I like to do, and I've switched it around, like I said a minute ago, talking about before I would go and ask the bank, hey, would you lend me this money? Immediately, it almost puts up like an immediate no before I say yes. But what I've created, and this is in Dolph's book, a proposal for finance. And instead of going to the bank and asking for something, I actually sit down, and I've stolen Dolph's idea and it's worked. I'll explain it. But essentially it's got a 1-page summary of the property that you're purchasing, and it's got the lease if there is one, it's got your pro forma, it's got, the survey if you have one, just information on the site, what the market rent is, what you expect to, rehab it for, all the information that would be required for the bank to underwrite the deal. So what I do is, instead of asking, I go and give them my proposal for finance, and I offer them my building as collateral in exchange for a mortgage. So I offer them something instead of asking. So immediately they have the option to say no versus immediately just saying no.
Yeah.
So I try and play a little psychological warfare with them. But a step further with that too, like I would print out like packets, and I'd have like sticky notes on the top, and I'd say, like West Alabama Bank, Millennial Bank, Renaissance Bank, Oakworth Capital. Like I started like and I just like flip through it. Oh, this one's for you. And I just like would leave. And I'd like flip through it, like act like I was like I've got all these other options.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a little showmanship, sure, but it's worked.
Yeah.
It's worked. It's developed a relationship.
Yeah.
But a step further on that too, when we would go and lend money, let's say again on $1 million deal, what I would do is, if I knew it was vacant, my tenant or my banker knew it was vacant, another piece of advice quickly is, when you're first purchasing a property and you're meeting with and a bank's going to lend you money for the first time, don't try and get outside of the guardrails out of the gate. Meaning, if you're going to buy a building, like you're going to start buying $1 million building tomorrow, do it like the very middle of the fairway traditional way. Like, whether it's you and your rich uncle that you're bringing equity, you're going to borrow 75% from the bank. It's a great tenant with a 5-year lease, triple net. Like, do it the right way first, because then what that does in the bank size, because it goes a long way, especially with local banks, is the fact that you know how to do the deal. Like, the steps that it takes to actually transact a deal.
Yeah.
And then when you find a vacancy, or you got some type of seller to leave money in the deal in the second position, and you start getting creative, you can present that to them. And instead of you showing up with just this random one-off-the-wall offer, they're like, wait a minute, we've already done a deal with this guy. He knows exactly how to transact. You offer them something creative, they're going to look at you as sophisticated versus a risk.
Yeah.
And so it's a different like mindset shift in the bank's eyes, and you're more likely to get term sheets with creative terms after you've done something kind of down the middle of the fairway. But with vacancies, what we'll do is we'll offer the bank interest carry. So if we anticipate the rehab and to pull permits and to get the CO on a building, it's going to take 6 months, maybe less. During that whole time, we've got leasing agents that are out there shopping the site to be leased at market rents. And then we know after 6 to 8 months, again, the building is occupied and cash flowing. First, we'll get interest only for that time, but then we'll also borrow $50,000 on top of our mortgage in order to service the debt while we're and float us.
Yeah.
That kind of game.
Yep.
So it's not rocket science, but I learned that like just recently, like 18 months ago. I was like, wait a minute, I can actually borrow the interest from the bank and pay them with it,
Yeah.
So that was another fun
Basically,
little fact I
they
learned.
can pay themselves to
Pay
an
themselves.
extent.
Yeah, exactly.
And add it on my back
bridge
end.
loan themselves, I guess.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, well, and that's smart. It's, again, one of the many ways to mitigate that risk, which is, that's interesting. Approaching the bank with an opportunity instead of a question, instead of an ask, and doing that not just with the bank, but I heard that first, probably from Bigger Pockets or somewhere, but talking with private lending or giving an opportunity to a private investor to say, hey, do you want to fund the part that the bank's not going to take down? And so I've only raised money twice, but when we did that, it was presenting an opportunity. Hey, here's what we're offering. Here's the 15% IRR, and all the metrics of the deal. Do you want in? Because if not, hey, I don't have the stack, but I like that guy going through. It's like, all right, well, this one's yours. If you want it, let me know by Friday. Like, right? Yeah. I like that. Now that's once you build those relationships, I'm guessing, more of a question, you're not going through saying, all right, here's my stack, like, let me know. It's you've got your relationships and now that's built, so you don't have to have that showmanship as much.
Yeah, that was kind of when I was first getting going. I was just talking to anybody that would talk to me. Now it's what I've even developed is a sense from each bank on what their risk appetite is. So now it's like, okay, I know this deal that I'm going to try and take down is this bank will like this. Or, hey, if I'm going to raise capital and the seller doesn't want to leave money in the deal, I'm going to call this guy because we can do a swap on the interest rate. We can get cute with interest only for an extended period of time. So I know which banks have certain, I got a bank that can do 25-year AMs at 85% loan to value. Depending upon the risk of the deal, that's kind of who I tend to throw my dart at and say, hey, we might be compatible on this deal. Do you want to maybe take this down together? And it's cool because now I'm like, I've been like Christmas dinners with some of my bankers. I've become like buddies with them now.
Yeah.
Our families go to dinners together, and you know, I'm totally fine being the asset to the bank, and they're like, hey, this guy's a low risk borrower. So hopefully the next time that they have an influx of cash, they're calling me to say, hey, you got anything else that's new that we can lend you money on? And it's just a really good working relationship, I guess.
Yeah, and that's something that I haven't seen. I mean, I started in 2012, so it's only been a good economy since then, right? So I've heard the horror stories of '08 and banks pulling stuff from out of, the rug out from under people. But I think because of those stories, I approached it as the bank's not my friend, right?
Sure.
But I've experienced the same thing as having those relationships at Millennial. We deal a lot with them, and saying, no, we're doing this together. We enjoy working together. My loan officer is not the president of the bank, so ultimately it's not his decision. But like we're doing this together, right? And we're friends. We're golfing together. So I think that was a big switch in my mind sometime in the past of, oh, yeah, I'm not here to fight you. Like we're here together.
Yeah, you're definitely on the same page. And when you think of it as a partnership, the same way that I think about my partnership with my tenants, like I said before, I kind of joke and I say that when I had residential property, I was the mustache guy from Monopoly, like the greedy landlord. Everybody was, I was out to get you.
Yeah,
and it's just the different relationship when you discover that, hey, banks don't make money without lending money. Like every deposit is a liability of these banks. So they have to go and lend money. And so in their eyes, they're like, who can I lend money to that is safe and reliable? And so if you can position yourself as, again, a down the road, a middle of the road person and borrower that pays their mortgage every month, I mean, you'd be blown away. As you probably know, you service debt for 12 months in a row with a tenant that has a 5-year lease on it and it just ACHs, they don't have to think twice. They are calling you like, what's next? Like, what's next? And so that's a fun position to be in as an investor, where you can have multiple banks calling you, asking you, hey, what's next? We have more cash that we need to deploy.
Yeah.
We trust you enough to where I need to buy you some lunch or maybe a couple of beers and discuss how we can go partner on the next site together.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you done or have any interest in new ground up development? Or is it all resale stuff?
I'm not opposed to anything, right? Like I love learning. I think having the title developer is cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have the sophistication or really the appetite or the patience for dealing with municipalities.
Yeah.
I've done this in the past. I've had to rezone sites, maybe just like you, having to deal with. I'm experienced. We're finally closing this deal next week, but just dealing with municipalities and candidly. A lot of buff in them thinking that they're high and mighty and we're smarter than you and it's my way or the highway. And I don't really like that. I'm more of a, like, how can we all win together type of person.
Yeah.
But I'm not opposed to anything. We're working on a deal downtown next to a couple other of my buildings where we're going to maybe knock down a site and turn it into some outdoor storage with a little facility. So we'll see what happens. But definitely not opposed to anything. But the development, I just don't think I'm smart enough or don't have the patience for municipals right now.
Yeah.
But maybe not. Who knows? That could change.
Yeah. Well, I might be your guinea pig this year. So
okay. All right. I like that.
I'll make all the mistakes so you can come in.
I love that. I love that. That sounds
I don't know.
great.
Maybe not. My goal this year is to buy a 7-figure warehouse or develop. So I'm looking at some land, but we'll see.
It's tough right now. I mean, when you're looking at you're looking at the cost to develop and you're looking at replacement costs. It just I'm buying sites depending upon location. We just bought a building over in Leeds. I bought that for $38 a foot, 28,000 square feet, and you can't build for like a third of that. I mean, you're looking at probably $120 a foot to build something that's really more of a spec, not even any bells and whistles in it. So it's expensive to build that. Plus the replacement cost is like $200 a foot. So just on the insurance side of it, so that just pumps the premium. So it's just this kind of stall right now where cost is expensive, but it's hard to find good deals, and debt's kind of expensive still. So it's this really weird, like, who's going to blink first kind of thing. Is it going to be the banks? Is it going to be the contractors? Is it going to be the owner users? Like, who is it going to be? But that's kind of the art of the deal. That's what makes it fun.
Yeah, it is. And it's an exploratory, that's the phase I'm in, right?
Yes.
So it may not pencil, but we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see as part of the process.
Well, you just keep throwing darts at the map. I mean, that's what when we have what we call our CRE collective. It's a private mentorship. It's a partnership with people from all over the country. And I tell people the same thing. When you find that site, so what we'll do is we'll tell people, find those physical attributes like we mentioned a minute ago. Once you find that site, then we start to reverse engineer on the financials. It needs to have a 10 cap. It needs to be a 1-4 debt ratio and at least a 10% cash on cash return if you're going to inject equity.
Right.
Well, most everybody, and it's not uncommon to say, those sites don't exist. You can't find buildings. Everything that's, that those attributes, which is a great site, those things are trading in the 6s. Well, which is not uncommon, right? It's totally not uncommon.
Yeah.
And that's number one. It goes back to developing a relationship with your broker, to knowing that when that property does come up, you're the first person he thinks about. But also I say, you can't predict this seller's personal situation now or in 6 months. We have a guy in our group down in Miami where everything's expensive, and he's looking at a site, 22,000 square feet. The building is probably worth, it's a good site. And he goes and they're offering it right now at a 5.5 cap rate. He offers at a 10. And the brokers just didn't respond to him. He was like, I'm a little discouraged, this, that, and the other. And I said, you got to stick with your guns. I mean, the only reason I say this is because I purchased real estate below that in the past. Hasn't burned me, but they end up being like a little more headache and a little more involved. It was a gross modified lease, so it's a little more like hands-on. But I told him, I was like, stick with it and stay up with that guy because the building is still for sale. Nothing's changed. There's been no activity. And what do you know? This guy calls my guy back and says, hey, are you still interested? I could do this deal like a 9.5 cap rate because he just discovered like his wife had a cancer or something happened in their lives. But Johnny was the first guy he thought of. Yeah. And so that's, for me, I'm like, I'm telling you, if you just stick with your guns, you'll get good sites because if you just blast out enough offers on those good deals or on those good sites, eventually you're going to get something that comes back because someone's personal life changes and they need to get out,
especially if you have good follow-up, right?
Yes.
Because most 95% of people are blasting that out. It's a no. All right, move on to the next thing and forget it, right? If you're teaching that good follow-up, again, as an agent, no one does that, right? Come back to me because one thing you mentioned in residential, it's the same as commercial because we're dealing with people. Money's not always the motivator, period, right? And we're in a massive wealth transition with the generation. That's what people have to recognize is money's a lot of time the motivator, but it's not always the motivator. And so with that consistent follow-up and maybe repeating that offer every month or whatever it is, there's opportunity there.
Well, it goes a step further, like what you said is, this is not only in our real estate business, but I have a life insurance business, like you mentioned, Jordan Cole. I work with Jordan. We do cash value life insurance coupling with real estate investment, and it's a cool way to mitigate taxes and protect your money from litigation. It's a cool strategy, and it's called Infinite Banking. If your followers have heard of it, I've got like 6 policies now. I'm a raving fan of the strategy coupled with investment, and not only like you said about the follow up and things like that, but for anybody trying to get into real estate in general, I like to create what I'll call a standard operating procedure for everything that I do. No matter an offer on a building, I've got my acquisition blueprint. Maybe you have seen that before, but it's all 50 steps that it takes in order to get a deal across the finish line. Everything, from talking to the contractor to, speaking, sending out an email to your insurance agent to, retaining an attorney to walking the site with your inspector, like every single step and rung on the ladder to sending out K1s at the end from your accountant, right? Like every single step. So I've discovered that what that does is it removes emotion and it removes when you don't have a direction, when you're like, what do I do next? It's like, no, you follow the operating procedure, you follow the plan and the steps in order to move. Because like you said, if someone's going to say no, part of the operating procedure for Johnny with that guy in Miami was you just keep touching them, and you just never know what's going to happen. And but what happens is people say it doesn't work, the world's ending, the sky is falling. It's because they, like you said, they hear no and they say, well, it doesn't work. I'm not a trillionaire yet. It's been 4 weeks. How come I don't have all this money? And it's the people that stay in it and stay consistent. When everyone else quits, it's like the last guy that just like, what do they say? Chop wood, carry water. Chop wood, carry water. You just like keep doing it. You just keep going back and forth. And eventually it just becomes a part of your habit and routine. It's like who you are.
Yeah. No, I love that. And that's the systems that I was talking about in the very beginning that make you successful, right? I mean, it's just, are you willing to put in the work? So I love that. 2025. So I'm a big goal setter, planner. It takes a lot of accountability to keep me on track for those.
Sure.
Have you done that for the year? What does the year look like for you?
Yeah, so I have a mentor, believe this or not, his name is Peter Seligman. He's up in Toronto, and I met him on a mountain in Vail. And
Nice.
It's bizarre how we got to meet each other. And he's a big life insurance producer up there, and he's turned into a really, really great friend and a mentor of mine. And we went over actually on Tuesday our goals for the year. And so I've got 3 business goals and 3 personal goals. I'll call it more just on the personal side today. But the first one is I want to teach my son Pryor how to play racquetball.
Nice.
I'm a big racquetball player. I play like 5 days a week. I actually won the Alabama State Championship.
No way.
Back in May. I got to retain my title in March of this year down in Mobile. And so I play about every day. So I want to teach him how to play.
Yeah.
I want to have a backyard that is manicured. I want to have a garden. We have a garden back there for tomatoes and okra and things like that. But like a fun hosting backyard where people can come over. We can watch a game and things like that. And then I want to have a stronger relationship with Jesus Christ. I want to be a better Christian. I want to be a better parent, a better husband, and that starts with reading my Bible every day. That starts with going to being more involved in church and just focusing more on other people than just myself, and not just focusing only on Nolan, but how can I help other people and have the tide raise all ships. So those are my kind of 3 goals as a person. I don't know if I'll achieve them or not. Pryor probably, I'm not letting him beat me, even though he's only 2.
Right. Hey, you're starting him early.
I got to start him early.
10 years from now.
But those are the 3 things that I just try and I think I'm shooting for personally, and then we can go into the real estate stuff. I would like to buy 4 more buildings, develop a site, kind of like what you said. And then there's some life insurance goals that I have too. That it takes a great team that we've developed. I got some guys that are working for me that are just busting it, and it's a lot of fun. It's really exciting, like what we're going to do in the new year, I think.
Yeah.
What about you?
After this, remind me to show you. Well, so one of my goals is to finish. I've named it Kidtopia, but we live on a little dead end street. I told you we're in Bluff Park, and my neighbor across the street is a little one car width dead end. We're the second to last house. The guy across from me just moved, and he owned 4 acres of just woods. He had walking trails through there. And I've told him, we've been there for 10 years. I've told him since day one, if you ever move, I want the land. Just so no one builds, like, don't mess up the peace back here. And he was like, all right, we're moving, and I'm selling everything. And I was like, okay, I'd love the land. He goes, I'm not breaking it up, but you got to sell you got to buy the house too. And I was like, it's a $450,000 house. I don't have a need for it. I don't want it, but also like I really want this land. And first world problems, right? Like
That's right.
I'm very blessed to be in the position to be able to buy all of it. And we're working to separate and redraw lines. And we're trying to get I'm floating the house, trying to get a tenant in there just to float it until I can get a friend to buy it, or I'm trying to get my parents to buy it and just be like, have the kids run out the door. It'd be awesome.
Man.
I told you my dad
Parents
joined.
are pretty close to you there.
Yeah, which like it would be amazing.
Okay, that's
good.
good.
I told you my dad joined me in real estate. He worked for the power company as an engineer for 40 years. He just retired last year. He's joined me full time. We've got a wood shop, and just
awesome.
it'd be really cool.
Yeah.
But my goal is to finish what I've called Kidtopia, which is about an acre of that I've already half cleared, and it's going to have kind of a side story. I kind of traded time to be able to keep anything that I found in an old golf center that I've trashed out, and so I've got 13,000 golf balls. I've got hitting mats, and so I'm going to make a putting green with chipping mats, with swing set, with zip lines.
That's awesome.
It's just,
That'll be fun.
Yeah, and it's good. It's a hosting spot. We love hosting. We have our small group and our church over, our friends over.
Yeah.
I've sold 18 of our friends on our street. So like everyone.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
So it's just like this
mixing work with pleasure right there.
100%.
Business and pleasure.
Yeah. So I told everyone, like, you can't go anywhere. Like we're all going, right?
That's awesome.
So my goal is to finish that by summer. Really like just have it totally done. And there's still like 3 acres of walking trails that, as kids grow up, maybe it's, little motocross trails or something like that.
Maybe buy a couple horses.
Maybe. That hasn't crossed my mind yet.
Yeah.
But it's kind of open to anything. Like we've got a group me of all the dads, and I'm like, hey, throw out ideas. Like, what are we doing?
Seriously.
So it's been a lot of fun.
That sounds cool.
So that's a big one, is just being there and then being more present, right? It's hard to, in this industry and in this, especially with kind of the investor, the sales. I've got an equipment company I just started. There's a lot of different things. It's hard to be present when I walk in and just put the phone down and be there, right? Because if you're in the room, be in the room kind of thing. And so
that's tough to do.
It is. I've gotten better at it, especially as I've grown a team around me to say, hey, we each have our own lanes. And I don't have an expectation for y'all to answer the phone after 5 o'clock. And so I need to teach myself that.
Yeah.
And I'm always going to struggle with it, but that's a big thing this year.
That's awesome.
So,
I mean, like you said, it's at the end of the day, it's something that it's tough to quantify, but it's also like what we do in for the guys that work for me, McKinley and Zane. We've got we got a whole page called our SOP, our standard operating procedure. We've got pages on Google Drive, and everyone's accountable every single week for a certain amount of interactions. I have to make a certain amount of videos.
Yeah.
Everybody has a set of like, this is a standard, this is the quota for this week. And we're, so far we're planning, it's only been a couple of weeks, but very adamant about sticking with that, because like you said, that's even myself, just being accountable to somebody else, it just changes your perspective. Like before, I'd be just making a video just if I was feeling it.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, dude, I gotta start banging these things out.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, I got a big quote. I got to hit 16 every single week. People don't want to hear me talk that much.
Yeah.
But it ends up with social media, like what we're doing here. You discover how far your reach really can go, and like I said, some of the people that come into my pipeline, I'm usually just blown away by. I got a client of mine that has his name on a building at Texas A&M.
That's crazy.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
So he got me into some oil in West Texas and a saltwater facility and some exploratory stuff up in North Dakota and Amarillo. It's just like, just from one dude, just from a social media post. It's like, whoa.
You just don't know where it's going to lead.
You just don't know. So what we're doing right now is awesome, and it just doesn't go away. Like you said, 2025 and beyond. I think it's really exciting.
That's exciting. I'm excited to watch you grow. You're talking about accountability. We've got Thursday morning, or now we moved it to Wednesday's mastermind, where Todd and I see each other weekly, and there's 4 or 5 other guys in there.
I probably have seen you in the background of Todd's posts.
You probably.
I just did not recognize it was you at the time.
Yeah. But the accountability, the whole thing is that all of us are entrepreneurs and business owners and self-driven, but that accountability piece, like I need it all the time for everything. And there was a Q1 and Q2 of last year, we'd have these quarterly goals, and we talk about what are the weekly goals that are going to progress you there. And there was just multiple weeks in a row. It was like, she didn't hit it. And the group's like, okay. It's like, no, we need a little bit more accountability instead of you just looking at me saying, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, because it's not, right? Like, that's why we're here. And so Q3, I said, I'm in strategic coach. You've heard of Who Not How, or Dan Sullivan.
Oh, yeah.
Hardy. So
Dan Sullivan's pretty sharp.
Yeah. So I've been in a coaching program for 2 years.
Okay, cool.
And so he's got a daily activity tracker and a habit tracker. And so my Q3, because every single time we meet in Chicago once a quarter, and so every single time I go up there, I come back fired up because it's awesome. Like that effect. Wow. And then I come back and it just kind of dies away. And so Q3 was, I'm going to fill out this thing every single time, and every Thursday I show up that I have not done it, I owe each of you $100.
Love it.
And I didn't have to pay out one time.
That's awesome.
Because it was that accountability, right?
Totally.
Wednesday, I know I'm like, I have to fill this thing out,
or
I'm going to be $500 poor.
Yeah, that's right.
And so that extreme accountability, which I haven't come up with like any penalties or anything like that this year, but that's kind of where my mindset goes of like, it's a challenge against myself, and that's like where I'm going to be the most competitive. And I'm sure you've got some competitive bones in you playing professional sports, but
well, I was a wannabe at the time, and like I take that out on the racquetball court now with some of my buddies. So, but it's the accountability, like you said, is the name of the game. It's the follow through. It's doing things that you don't necessarily want to do. Like I've discovered too, even because I manage all those properties, the 12 of them, but it's really not a lot of management. It's 12 of them, but they're all triple net leases except for one.
Yeah.
So there's not a whole lot of management, but maybe what do they always say? Like, kind of fall in love with the process. It's a little philosophical, but it's true though. It's when I'm in the weeds of talking, like just this afternoon when I was on the other line before, literally talking with my tenant, trying to figure out this whole electrical situation because we got to move a breaker box because they've got this issue with their product and it's got to get moved. And so it's kind of fun because I'm like, I hate doing this, like on the surface, like this is so annoying.
Yeah.
Because I'm talking to some guy that's not my problem. Like this is just my building. You figure it out on your site. But also it kind of I enjoy the like the creativity and how can we create a solution here versus just saying like not my circus, not my monkeys.
Yeah.
And of course, then when that opportunity for him to either renew his lease or to go somewhere else, he's going to say, I really like this landlord. We're good teammates.
Yep.
And that's really the longevity, the long play that I think we're all chasing. That comes with that kind of daily accountability of like staying in it and trusting and playing the process game.
Yeah, and about the relationships, right? I mean, it's a relationship business. So on Facebook Marketplace, looking around, seeing what warehouse space just happened to pop up. Saw your name as the seller on one of them. So you're selling a property now, or
yeah, I'm selling one I'm selling one on Monday. It was supposed to be tomorrow, but the weather. And then I've got
closing Monday.
Yes, closing Monday.
Nice.
I'm selling it.
Yeah.
I'm selling it to the tenants at a price that would probably not be traded on the market.
Yeah.
I'm getting it's at like a 4.5 cap rate basically.
That's awesome.
So it's a good deal for me.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be able to trade that to an investor, of course.
But it's worth the most to that tenant.
That's right. That's right. I mean, they've invested their own money into the facility, so it'll be a good deal for both parties. I've got another building over in Tarrant that I purchased a couple years ago. And my tenant is moving out. He bought the business from the owner user, and the seller at the time left money in the deal, financed me the down payment, so I got in it for no money, which is cool. And now the guy that bought the business is moving to Pelham, and so I just was like, I just put it up for lease, put it up for sale, just trying to find if I'm just not opposed to it. It's over on Jefferson Boulevard. Yeah. It's like 27,000 square feet. It's a nice building. It's got a couple roll-up doors. It's got a mezzanine in there, which can turn some people off because they want to have like a crane that goes inside. But just finding the right tenant and the right fit. Everyone's business is different, and unique. But like I said, I'm not opposed to anything. I like doing a deal, selling it on terms, like just getting cute, trying to find a way. That's what makes it fun.
Well, I love that. Not anything that I've invested in besides one Airbnb. Try to have multiple exit strategies. And if I flip a house. Same thing for the house across the street from me. It's for sale to the right person, not openly to the market, but it's also for rent, right? And kind of having that opportunity and option for both, where you're not pigeonholed into one corner.
Yeah, I got a friend of mine in Birmingham who's a really large player and probably 50 years old. We're probably $100 million, maybe more, maybe less. And I've got a chance to get to know him because I used to do baseball lessons with his son, and which was kind of a cool lead-in when I didn't know anybody because I'm from out of town.
Yeah.
And one thing that he mentioned to me that was really important, that's kind of impacted how I invest now, is he's like, look, Nolan, I don't care if we're doing a deal that's worth $1 million or worth $25 million. Like the size doesn't matter. What matters is how we're going to get our money back in 12 months. How are we going to double our money in 12 months? Like that's the key. And when I'm thinking about that, usually what you're looking at is like a 10 cap's a good deal, right? And I look at that and think, well, that's tough to do. I mean, but he's like, that's the whole point though, is like he's in multifamily and they'll go buy a 400 unit apartment building for $20 million, get cute with the terms, and then they'll put lipstick on and pop it for $35 million.
Yeah.
Like within 8 months. I mean, he's got the Midas touch. It's remarkable. But he's like kind of coached me a little bit to not in like a sense where we sit down and like go to coffee and stuff, but just like when I go and ask for his advice, he's like, look, when you're looking at a site, don't just look at the existing site and the existing lease. Like what is around it? How can you go and develop something? How can you purchase a parcel? How can you go and build a parking lot? What if you built another building? Like just finding ways to think outside of the box, not just on the existing building in the existing parcel. Like how can you excrete more juice out of that deal? Compared to how it currently sits, because you buy a building that's 60% occupied, a multifamily building. I don't know his business that well, but on commercial, it's like that's where I'm talking about with vacancies. You find a vacant building that's maybe a little dilapidated. All it needs is some paint and maybe repoint some brick, do a couple things on the inside, some little things like that. You tenant the space out and immediately you double the value. And then you can pop it or you can refinance your equity out. And so that's a big thing that in the book Dolph taught, but for him it really hit home. It was like, dude, you got to find a way to double the value. That's how the big dogs make it. A double in value, not just buying something just to cash flow at a 6.5 cap. That's been my observation. I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to be doing, is just looking for not only the existing parcel but what's around it. Like for example, I'll give you this detail. We got another facility that we're looking at. I own this parcel. And there's 2 other parcels that this guy owns that he bought for absolutely nothing. There's a 2,000 square foot warehouse right here. This is 20,000 square feet. I bought this property for taxes, for the back taxes. it had like $600,000 of mortgage liens on it, like a bunch of debt. The guy went broke in like '08, so he probably took a bunch of debt on and then just foreclosed. I have since released these liens, went to every single bank. The guy died, so he had to go talk to his executor, all that stuff. Released all $600,000 liens. We're in negotiation with this guy right now in this 2,000 square foot lot. I'm going to buy both of these parcels. I'm going to knock this down and put a big laydown yard and just rent this out to like a dump company or a dumpster company or some type of outdoor excavating company or something.
Steel.
But think of it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But like the focus out of the gate was on this building. But then it's like, well, what's around it? This little box right here, knock this down, could have an acre, 2 acres of laydown yard, and this could just be, the holding tank for their office. So it's little things like that I had not really thought much about before. I'd been focused only on the existing parcel. Yeah. Now looking at thinking outside the box and just trying to stretch that creativity. You just never know what's going to happen. It'll pop up.
Well, it's so important because I've been, in the deal where you're so focused in the deal, it's helpful to have someone else, a mentor, just someone else who knows the business, come in and lay your eyes on it. They're not in the weeds, who's looking from a 30,000 foot view to say, because when you hear that, you're like, oh, it's so obvious. But when you're in it, you're like, I can't even pay attention to that. Let me look at what I've got. And so I think that's so good. And having those people surrounding you to give you that advice, that's big.
Well, because the whole thing out of the gate was, I can buy the back taxes. It's a 20,000 square foot warehouse for like $9,000.
Yeah.
And then a couple of $1,000 on retainer fees to an attorney. I'm like, this is a good deal. So my initial thought was, what if I just pop this to somebody else for like $100,000?
Yeah, easy money.
On paper, that's a good deal.
Yeah.
But then it's like, well, let me take a step back and start thinking, instead of selling it, what if I could hold it and just find a way to create a higher and better value? Yeah. And sometimes those other opportunities just kind of pop up like that.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, I've taken a lot of your time.
Awesome.
Before we wrap up, how can people find you? How can people learn
you can
about more?
find me on TikTok, I guess, if it's still around. I don't know if they're going to ban it or not, but I'm the industrial real estate investor. You can type in my name, Nolan Sanburn. I'm on social media on, I guess YouTube and Instagram too. But if you just type in my name, you'll find me. My whole page, I just try and be the most transparent, down-to-earth dude of all time. Like, I literally give the keys to the Mercedes away. I tell you exactly how I do everything that I do. Yeah. I share my pro formas, my blueprints, all that kind of stuff. I'm just... The tide raises all ships. Any way I can help any of your followers, you, of course, I'm so open to it. I'm always around. And like I said, I love doing deals. Yeah,
that's awesome. Before we go, we've talked about a couple books. Any other books or podcast recommendations that you're listening to or reading?
It's hard to say. There's a couple books. There's I'm reading one right now. It's called Trump Real Estate Strategies. It's written by Bill Ross, who is his... one of his main executives that works for him for the Trump organization. Right, left, or indifferent, that's not the point. The fact is, he just did a bunch of cool deals and negotiated them, and I like learning about that. Yeah. Of course, Rich Dad Poor Dad, the commercial real estate investing, and then Becoming Your Own Banker by Nelson Nash. That was another one that just impacted how I think about the world. I before was a very naive, cocky former baseball player that thought he knew everything because he had 10 or 11 houses. Yeah. And when I first discovered the infinite banking strategy, I told the advisor to go kick rocks. I was like, I don't need this stupid ass idea. Like I'm smart. Don't you know I'm 27? I've got 11 houses, Yeah. And he's like, dude, I'm not trying to sell you anything. Just check it out. It's a better warehouse for your capital than your bank account. Yeah. And I said, all right, give me that book. Let me read it. I'm going to prove that I don't need this idea. Yeah. And I read it and then I reread it and I was like, oh my God, there's something to this. Yeah, there's something to this. And so now, since I was in medical sales before at Stryker Sports Medicine, quit that job, and now I'm an advisor at Nolan and Associates right down the street here in Homewood. And we just literally teach people how to couple their whole life insurance policies with commercial real estate, or how to purchase debts like a vehicle or student loan or credit card, and essentially buy that debt and redirect that cash flow to inflow versus outflow without changing their lifestyle and making them more wealthy at the same time. So I get a lot of joy showing up every day. I feel really fortunate.
Yeah. How much of your time is split between that versus real estate versus
it's hard to say. I would say thankfully I've got McKinley and Zane that are great teammates, and they do a lot of the I'll generate the leads, and they do a lot of conversing back and forth with our members of our collective, and also my existing clients that are purchasing real estate or using policy loans to pay down debts and things. I would say I spend the majority of my time, as you know, with social media. It can be time consuming. It can be a lot of effort. But I make videos every day just on what I'm working on, sites that I'm working on, things. Yeah. But I'm emailing with people, dealing with existing clients, working with those people. It's probably 50-50. I can, maybe it's more, maybe it's less.
Yeah. One day's 90-10, the other day
that's
it's
right.
the opposite. Yeah.
That's literally exactly it.
Yeah. How's it average out? Yeah.
But it's fun though when I wake up, I've got the calendar kind of pretty empty during going into the week. But of course, as you know, it'll fill up like immediately.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a good video go out pretty viral.
Yeah.
Things can change very quickly.
Yeah, one thing I implemented last year that, again, I'm not great at, but Monday mornings we have our team meeting at 8:30, and by 10, there's no white space on my calendar. That's like the no white space.
That's awesome.
And so just looking, even if it's, hey, Thursday afternoon, I'm mountain biking, and that's not changing. Mm-hmm. You want to go see a house? Sorry, I'm booked. Right? And like just keeping that. And so I'm proactive instead of reactive, and that's a big thing that, again, I'm not great at it, but that's the intent.
Yeah, so. I mean, even with my exercise too, even like everybody, I turn my phone on Do Not Disturb for that like hour and a half, and I just don't talk to people on it. I'm like, can't get a hold of me. This is just my time and myself right now. Don't have crazy screaming kids.
Like no one's screaming at me.
Seriously,
that's so good.
But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Look forward to seeing you next time.
Absolutely. See you.
All right.